What's up, everybody? Welcome back into Lettermen Row, another edition of the offseason report, and a huge edition as a monumental shift for the Ohio State program, as all of those juniors that you thought might be going to the NFL are now coming back to Ohio State, with the notable and understandable exception of Marvin Harrison Jr., with the notable exception of Michael Hall at defensive tackle. All the other Buckeyes are coming back. TreVeyon Henderson, the cherry on top of this January Sunday for Ohio State. That's the 40-year vet Tim May over there. We're going to talk about it as TreVeyon Henderson is back for his senior season. One of the best running backs in the country, Tim, the last 3 years, is going to be in the Heisman Trophy conversation to start 2024 as one of the country's best tailbacks. This is a huge day for Ohio State, not only getting JT Tuimoloau back earlier in the day, and we talked about that on the Lettermen Row YouTube channel, but now getting TreVeyon Henderson back and kind of solidifying this offense as, maybe turning back into what we expect it to be.
Yeah, we're using this almost as these announcements as hamburger helper, because we're sitting there, and you, me, and Andy Backstrom were doing a vid about the impact of JT Tuimoloau returning, a big time playmaker who maybe needs just a little more smidge of consistency. If he wants to come back and win a Big Ten championship and go into the college football playoff, that's motivation for him to be with his band of brothers again. As we were doing that, at the very end of that, we got news that TreVeyon Henderson was coming back. And why not, as I said, use a hamburger helper and extend that for another day, for another video, because TreVeyon Henderson deserves his own video. And like you pointed out, when he's been healthy, and that's the key, when he's been healthy, he's been as explosive, as dangerous, as effective a running back as there is in the nation. The question has always been, or the problem, not even really a problem, but because you shouldn't be playing if you're not 100% or pretty close to 90%. Let's leave it at that. But the problem for him has been staying healthy. But when he's healthy, we roll the highlights. So that touchdown run against Notre Dame, before he took that cheap shot, and he did take a cheap shot in that game, as you pointed out in the video, which put him on the shelf for a while, because he learned the previous year, don't come back until you're fully healthy, which he tried to do on a bad foot the previous year. This time he had an internal problem where he got popped in the lower ribs, and it took him a while to feel 100%, and for the doctors really give him the 100% signal. I keep using 100%. I can't help it, man, because even at 90%, this guy's really, really good. And he got bottled up by Missouri in that Cotton Bowl, which he played in, which he didn't. If he was leaving, he probably wouldn't have. But he was really Ohio State's one offensive, good point about the Cotton Bowl was he ran hard. The holds weren't always there, etc. But he showed his determination. And even back then, there was a hint. There were hints going around he was coming back and what that would mean for this offense. Now he's teamed up with Will Howard, in the backfield, a quarterback who can run. And when you not only who can run, but will run, he was going to have that with Devin Brown, but Devin Brown got hurt, of course, in the first quarter there against Missouri. But when you put a dual threat back there with a running quarterback and a guy like TreVeyon Henderson and another guy who you're going to talk about here in a second, this offense has just taken a couple of leaps forward without even playing in this offseason. And it just continues the most incredible January I've really been about here covering Ohio State, going on 41 seasons. I mean, this January, Ohio State and Ryan Day are winning the month of January. I keep saying that because it's obvious.
They certainly are, Tim, and it started with, did it start with Will Howard? I'm trying to remember the timelines here. It starts with a couple guys saying that they're going to return. It continues with Will Howard committing to Ohio State and presumably being the starting quarterback at Ohio State. Obviously a spring competition will determine that, but you have to think that Will Howard will have at least a little bit of an upper leg there. It continued with other guys then making their announcements. And then all of a sudden Michigan wins a national championship and the sky is falling. But 2 minutes after Michigan wins a national championship, Quinshon Judkins commits, two-time All-SEC running back, going into his junior season now. That's where I want to take this, Tim. Quinshon Judkins and TreVeyon Henderson, with the help of Dallin Hayden, especially in the spring. Whatever happens after spring, you can't really say. And I'm not here to spout conspiracy theories about who's going in the transfer portal. But I will say that at least for the spring, Ohio State has Quinshon Judkins, TreVeyon Henderson, Dallin Hayden, and James Peoples all on campus. Sam Williams-Dixon as well. Like, this is a
Yeah.
very, very talented running back room, and it's spearheaded by the 1-2 punch of an All-SEC running back 2 straight years in Quinshon Judkins and an All-Big Ten caliber running back in TreVeyon Henderson. Actually, an All-American caliber running back in TreVeyon Henderson. The Buckeyes have what I would say is safe to assume the best backfield in the country.
Yeah, but you know what? I agree. But I was saying that this time a year ago, with all these guys coming back. I was saying it 2 years ago with that loaded running back room. And it's funny how you end up using them all, and to a certain extent using them all up, kind of like tires on a race car. You put the next fresh tire on there after Chip Trainum, what he brought to this program the last 2 years, switching from a linebacker, which was when he transferred in from Arizona State, he was going to be a linebacker, and all of a sudden they needed him in a running back, and because everybody else, TreVeyon Henderson all got banged up, and it was the same this past year. I was doing it tongue in cheek. I was writing about how many they could go to the wishbone if they wanted to, and all this kind of stuff. No, they want one really good running back available every game. That's the wish list for Tony Alford, Ryan Day, and the Ohio State offense. But the thing about the three guys, especially you named right off the bat. I mean, Quinshon Judkins, TreVeyon Henderson, Dallin Hayden, in their own way, they've all proven themselves to be more than worthy, more than capable of being the primary back if called upon. And what happened with Dallin Hayden this past year, this red shirt thing they did with him, I'm still not clear on what that was all about. Because if he ends up being the back you think he's going to be, is he going to be here more than 4 years? He'll be going into his third year. But it's almost like you look at him as an insurance policy. But there are a lot of teams that would love to have a Dallin Hayden, man. I would love to have Dallin Hayden, not a Dallin Hayden. Would love to have the Dallin Hayden. And so, yeah, the spring is going to be interesting. Not just watching these guys work out, but watching how they maybe massage the ego aspect of the running back room, which, by the way, could be in a pretty good shape, because Judkins, I understand, is a hell of a guy. The people who've met him and stuff. We know about TreVeyon. TreVeyon is showing a lot of his colors right now as being a hell of a guy. I mean, people didn't know that before. He's a deep thinking fellow, et cetera. And so is Dallin Hayden. And so these guys all have the team in mind, I do believe, but you want to figure out a way to use all three of the primary dudes. And that's going to be the curious thing that goes on this spring, and how they keep everybody interested, if you follow me. Because if you feel like you're just an afterthought coming out of the spring, the transfer portal is always there for everybody.
It certainly is, Tim. Here's the thing about this running back room now. Quinshon Judkins in 2 years has more carries than TreVeyon Henderson and Dallin Hayden combined in the last 2 years, and especially the last 3 years. So Quinshon Judkins has a lot of tread left on the tire. I'm not saying that he's washed up as if he's like late year Frank Gore, just making a push at, but like, this is a guy who has taken a lot of hits in his career already. He had 274 carries as a true freshman at Ole Miss. Only 5 players in America had more carries than he did this year at Ole Miss. He had 271 of them. In 3 years, TreVeyon Henderson has 446 career carries, no more than 183 in a single season. Dallin Hayden's been used sparingly. Like, Ohio State is setting this up. So yes, it doesn't have it has 3 potential workhorses, but at the same time, it has none. And when you have 3, you have none. That's really a good thing, because you don't have to put a lot of tread on these running backs' tires. TreVeyon Henderson, I remember, Tim, I correct me if I'm wrong, I think he was on your podcast when he committed to Ohio State.
Yeah, well, he was on my podcast. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Not the moment he committed, but yeah, right after he committed, he was on my podcast a couple of times. I enjoyed talking to him. There was a lot going on in the world at that point, and he was well aware of it. And I've always enjoyed conversations with him. Sometimes when it comes down to just pure football, he's pretty clipped. But when you're talking about other things, that's where he gets interesting. Like, he and I both own Neo stock, for example, and we're always comparing notes, and we're hanging on to Neo because we got it at a bargain price, and we're waiting for it to soar again. Just things like that. Or I've always found him to be an interesting dude.
But when he committed to Ohio State, Tim, he talked about how he wanted to have, that tread left on the tires when he got to the NFL.
Oh, yeah.
And that's why he and Evan Pryor committed to Ohio State 2 weeks apart. Now, Evan Pryor's career, not derailed by injuries. We wish him the best at Cincinnati, but it hasn't been what he had hoped. It hasn't been what TreVeyon Henderson hoped for Evan Pryor. But you talk about wanting TreVeyon Henderson to come back. The best way to do that is to go out and get a guy like Quinshon Judkins and to have a guy like Dallin Hayden in there. Because, hey, TreVeyon, you can come back, make some money through NIL, have another chance to beat Michigan and win a national championship. And by the way, you don't have to put a lot of tread on your body and damage to your body as a running back, because you've got all of these guys who are going to be around you who can also carry the ball, who can also do things. By the way, they're adding a running element to the quarterback with Will Howard. So
exactly.
The things that they're doing
go ahead, I'm sorry.
The things they're doing to set this up for TreVeyon Henderson made it an easier decision for TreVeyon to say, yeah, you know what, I'll sign up for another year of that. With Quinshon, with Dallin, with Will Howard or Devin Brown, whichever one, that mobile elements there, with all the wide receiver talent, an improved offensive line, like everything came together in this perfect storm, along with NIL being legal for the last 3 or 4 years. Everything came together in this perfect storm, and now TreVeyon Henderson is back to help lead the Buckeyes, hopefully to something they haven't done in a decade, and that's win a national title.
Yeah, and the bottom line is the line. How much Seth McLaughlin is going to help them. McLaughlin, every way you want to pronounce it, is going to help them. Remains to be seen. The transfer from Alabama. He can play guard or center, as you pointed out. To some, especially some Twitter dude who took umbrage with you. Twitter dudes, man. But the bottom line is the whole running attack can be more potent this year instead of this past season, 2023. I think you agree. It was hit or miss, right? And and I don't know. It was hard to really, in some respects, to really count on it from week to week based on who was out, who was back there, and who was getting the job done. We saw the offensive line improve as the year went on. But for example, against Notre Dame, the biggest play of the game was really a combo of TreVeyon Henderson and a really good block on the edge by Marvin Harrison Jr. Otherwise, you take that play out of their rushing attack for that night, that was probably half their rushing yards. But it was a huge play, and that's what TreVeyon Henderson, getting back to him specifically, that's what he gives you at any moment. Lightning can strike, and Judkins is more of a plow the road kind of fella. I mean, maybe not of his own doing, but he gives you that. That, what do they call it, the hard ball? He's the hard ball, and Henderson's the fastball. And Dallin Hayden may be a combination of both. So that's the interesting aspect of this running back room as we speak about it now going into the spring. Will all these guys be healthy and go through the spring? Right now, the indication is they will be. But do they need to be? No. You want them, from the middle of August on, ready for duty. And that's what I'm going to be watching.
Yeah, Andy Backstrom wrote about it at LettermenRow.com. Just a great write about Quinshon Judkins and the way that he forces missed tackles. He forced 78 missed tackles on his runs this year. That is, TreVeyon Henderson forced 29. So that tells you what Quinshon Judkins can do, even behind a decent offensive line. I would call Ohio State's offensive line as of January 13th decent. I wouldn't call it great, but it can be better. And so they can improve through the spring and the summer. And if you add a guy who can force missed tackles like that into a room with a guy who has the home run ability of TreVeyon Henderson, that 1-2 punch is going to be pretty dangerous. And then you throw the change up, as I like to call it, with Dallin Hayden. That's a good trio of backs there, Tim, for James People to learn under, for Tony Alford to work with. There's a lot of potential here for the Ohio State running back room. And we saw it in the national championship game. Michigan used 2 running backs, or even 3 running backs. Blake Corum had a couple touchdowns at the end of the game. Donovan Edwards had a couple really nice long runs as the backup running back early in that game to put them up 14-3. And Khalil Mullings came in and was kind of a battering ram there.
Yeah.
I see the same thing in the Ohio State tailback room this year. Who's to say? But I think that you have the pieces there to do that if you choose.
Yeah. And the thing about it is you don't want to necessarily be predictable when you have a guy in there, one guy over the other and stuff. But there's nothing wrong with that to a certain extent either for a defense to look up and go, oh no, they're about to try to hammer us. You know what I mean? With a Judkins. And the thing about Judkins is when you watch his video highlights, and he's got plenty of them now, it's like you talked about the missed tackle aspect, how he runs through arm tackles. This guy is stout, and the real deal. Supposedly he had a I don't know, a reckoning moment with Lane Kiffin and the offensive staff. After the season was over. I mean, and I think laid out the fact that maybe he didn't want to be used as much as he was being used from the standpoint of it was taking a physical toll on him. And who knows what the real truth is? We'll get to talk to him, I'm sure, possibly on the second signing day, as I call it now, in the start of February, which will be an interesting conversation. But, that Ole Miss pipeline, man, could be feeding another big-time player, has fed another big-time player into the Ohio State ranks, with Davis Igbinosun and Tywone Malone, the first two to pop out of it. I mean, the Ole Miss pipeline is alive and well.
It is, and the Ohio State running back room is also alive and well, Tim, as Quinshon Judkins now joins TreVeyon Henderson, who is back for his senior season in 2024. TreVeyon Henderson, Dallin Hayden, Quinshon Judkins, that's a pretty ridiculously good running back trio. It kind of reminds me of Lettermen Row's Tim May, Andy Backstrom, and Spencer Holbrook, if I do say so myself. Whichever one I am, I'm not going to say. Then you got Matt Parker and Alex Gleitman on the recruiting side.
You're the home run hitter. You're the get on base guy. You're the steal second dude. I don't want to see you trying to steal every play, but every time you're on first. But you're that dude.
And then you've got Alex Gleitman and Matt Parker on the recruiting side doing a great job. As a dynamic duo. Come join us all. Lettermen Row, $1 for your first month. The message board is popping. The content is endless, and we're covering it all 365 days a year, like we do at all times. The Ohio State beat. Tim May, the 40-year vet. He's been there for a long time. We might have to switch it to the 41-year vet. We'll see what happens. I'm just Spencer Holbrook. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll see you guys back next week to do another one of these breakdowns of the Buckeyes.